Kiev, 1896, Industrial Exhibition Grounds. In a quiet corner of Pavilion 4, restorers opened a crate marked Acoustic Ornaments, Do Not Strike. Inside lay fragments of bronze, curved and resonant, each stamped with a number and a faint sigil shaped like overlapping circles. The catalogue listed them as decorative pieces, yet no record describes their installation. When lightly tapped, the metal emitted a hum at precisely 112 Hz, low enough to vibrate the glass display cases nearby. One photograph from that same hall shows a bell suspended above what appears to be an electrical generator, but in later prints the object is painted out. Curators called it a retouch in error. Dust lingers in the air. The bronze flickers like something alive. History remembers progress, but forgets what it replaced. The bell fragment rests silent now, yet its surface trembles as though remembering motion. In the spring of 1873, at the International Exposition of Paris, engineers from across Europe gathered to present new methods of casting large bells for civic towers. Official pamphlets celebrated metallurgy, harmony, and the march of progress. The displays gleamed beneath gaslight. Visitors crowded around polished bronze specimens, marvelling at their weight and tone. Yet in the archives of the foundry, Baptiste and Fils, preserved among dusty ledgers and technical diagrams, one sketch reveals something unexpected. Bell interiors engraved with concentric channels, more mechanical than ornamental, spiralling inward like the grooves of a turbine. We tune them not for the ear, one craftsman noted in a margin, but for the air itself. Light rain fell that afternoon. Witnesses later described a low hum lingering in the exhibition hall, even after the bells stopped ringing, a vibration felt in the chest rather than heard. The blueprints themselves bear an inconsistency. Two different completion dates appear on consecutive pages, one marked 1873, another 1877. When questioned decades later, archivists could offer no explanation. The ink matched, the handwriting remained identical. The bells had been delivered on schedule, they insisted, yet something in the records refused to align. By 1881, the design had travelled east, within the newly consecrated Cathedral of the Transfiguration in St. Petersburg. Vast bronze bells were hoisted into the tower during a ceremony attended by clergy and state officials. Priests claimed they marked divine hours, calling the faithful to prayer with tones that carried across snow-covered rooftops. Yet architectural drawings discovered in 1929 reveal a peculiar feature. Metallic rods connecting each bell to the roof's copper dome, a detail absent from official construction plans. Visitors to the cathedral that winter spoke of a tingling in the chest when the bells rang during storms, as though the air itself grew charged. Snow fell heavily, dampening the city's usual clamour, except at the cathedral, where echoes persisted long after the final toll. One deacon recorded his discomfort in a private journal. The sound does not fade as it should. It gathers, somehow, beneath the dome. The installation logbook, meticulously maintained for months, ends abruptly. Its final page is missing, torn cleanly from the binding. In the margin of the preceding entry, someone wrote in Cyrillic, "Completed as instructed, though not as designed." At the World's Columbian Exposition of 1893 in Chicago, the Great Columbian Chime stood as the centerpiece of the Transportation Building's acoustics display. Contemporary photographs show power cables running beneath the bell platform, coiled like black serpents against the polished wood. Yet the official guide makes no mention of electricity, describing the exhibit only as a marvel of modern casting techniques. A worker's diary, discovered in a storage crate in 1932, offers a different account. The entries are brief, factual, written in pencil that has faded but remains legible. Second week of installation. They told us to stand back during testing, said the tone could burn the skin if we got too close. Didn't explain why. On the back of one surviving postcard from the exposition, collectors noted a faint metallic dust pattern outlining the bell's contour, as if the image itself had been magnetized. When examined under magnification, the particles align in radial formations, spreading outward from the bell's crown. The exposition's removal records, typically exhaustive in their documentation of dismantled exhibits, end abruptly 2 months before the fair's official closure. The bell is never mentioned again. Following the exhibition in Kiev of 1896, museum records indicate that several bells were crated and shipped to destinations left unspecified. Inventory logs list their weight down to the kilogram, note their bronze composition with chemical precision, yet omit any mention of their foundry or intended use. The fragments discovered in Pavilion 4, those marked "Do Not Strike," vibrated under certain light frequencies, a phenomenon documented by restoration staff but never explained. An archivist who handled the catalogue during reorganisation efforts in 1912 recalled the curator's reaction upon first opening the crate. "He went pale," she wrote to a colleague, touched one of the pieces, then stepped back, whispered something I couldn't quite hear, sounded like, "These were never meant to ring for people." A ledger entry recording the shipment bears a curious error. The date is listed as 1886, 10 years before the exhibition itself took place. When cross-referenced with warehouse receipts, the discrepancy deepens, the crate number matches, but the contents shift between records. Most peculiar of all, dust accumulated on the fragments in radial patterns, spiraling outward from each piece's centre. Modern analysts comparing the formations to electrical experiments found them nearly identical to patterns produced during Tesla's early induction demonstrations. Work that would not be publicly presented for another decade. In 1898, architectural plans surfaced during renovations at the Royal Technical Institute in Dresden. Folded into a portfolio of structural sketches, the blueprint detailed a tower structure labelled Resonanzkammer, resonance chamber. Marginal notes written in careful Cyrillic script reference Kiev harmonics and registers of sustained frequency. When archivists cross-checked the plans against official building files, they found no record of construction. The tower, according to municipal records, was never built. Yet aerial photographs taken during a survey in 1910 show something unexpected: a circular foundation on the exact site specified in the blueprints, partially overgrown but clearly visible from above. Workers clearing the area for new construction reported finding copper fittings embedded in the stone, arranged in concentric circles. Local authorities declared it the remains of a garden fountain and ordered the site filled. The notes themselves present another mystery. Under ultraviolet light, the ink fluoresces faintly, a pale blue-green that modern analysts attribute to metallic particles suspended in the pigment. Chemical testing revealed traces of copper and zinc in ratios uncommon for standard writing inks of the period. When asked to explain the discrepancy, the Institute's director in 1931 simply stated, "We cannot account for every document in our collection." In 1902, restorers entering an abandoned foundry in Birmingham uncovered half-finished bells coated with graphite, their surfaces dull and lightless. Tags attached to each read prototype, electrical, yet no records linked them to church commissions or civic orders. The foundry had closed suddenly 3 years prior. Payroll books and casting schedules ended mid-entry. Tools left precisely where workers had set them down. Rainwater leaking through the collapsed roof had corroded most metal surfaces, reducing iron fixtures to rust and eating through copper piping. Yet one bell, smaller than the rest, still resonated faintly when struck with a wooden mallet. The tone was low, sustained, unnatural in its persistence. A reporter covering the restoration for a local paper described entering the foundry during testing. There was a pressure in the ears like altitude. The air felt heavy, charged. I had to leave after 10 minutes. The foundry's final payroll entry, written in the owner's hand, stops without explanation. Work halted by instruction from above. The sentence ends there. Below it, in different ink, someone added, "Moulds destroyed per directive, no inquiry permitted." A photograph from the restoration shows the bells arranged in rows, each stamped with sequential numbers. The final number in the series, 17, is missing. In 1905, a colonial administrator sorting through survey documents in Calcutta discovered a single photograph among routine temple records. The image showed a brass bell suspended over metallic rods shaped like tuning forks, arranged in a pattern too precise to be decorative. British surveyors had annotated it native religious device and filed it without further investigation, yet the structure matched European blueprints precisely, specifically those labelled resonant power assembly in technical drawings from the Paris Exposition. A note in the margin, written in English, read replica built from exhibition design, 1896, local foundry, commissioned by visiting engineer. The humidity of Calcutta had warped the photograph, creasing it along vertical lines and fading the emulsion. But when examined under infrared scanning equipment, decades later, faint traces appeared that had been invisible to the naked eye. Electrical cables running behind the altar, connecting the bell apparatus to something beneath the floor. The temple itself had been demolished in 1923 during urban expansion. No detailed records of its interior survived. A priest who had served there in his youth, interviewed in 1947, recalled the bell. It rang without being struck, during certain hours of the day, always the same tone. We thought it was a miracle. When asked if the sound felt unusual, he hesitated. It made the candle flames bend sideways. A letter dated 1910, discovered in the archive of the Vienna Institute of Physics, references cathedral harmonics, capable of transmitting energy through open air without wires. The author, physicist Carl Wünscher, cited bell measurements identical to those recorded in St. Petersburg and Kiev, down to the precise frequency of oscillation and the thickness of the bronze at specific points along each curve. His paper, titled Acoustic Transmission of Electrical Potential, was submitted for publication, but withdrawn before review. University records note only religious sensitivity as the reason, yet Wüncher's private sketches, preserved by a colleague, show something extraordinary: a map of Europe with bell tower locations marked as frequency nodes, their positions forming a network pattern remarkably similar to modern radio transmission maps. Each node corresponded to a city where the resonant bells had been installed. Lines connecting them followed ancient pilgrimage routes with uncanny accuracy. In one corner of the sketch, Wünscher wrote, "If the interval is maintained, the field persists indefinitely. Sound becomes structure." The sketches themselves exhibit an odd property. When touched, the paper vibrates faintly under candlelight, though whether this is due to air currents or something embedded in the material remains unclear. Laboratory tests conducted in 1968 detected trace ferromagnetic particles throughout the document, suggesting exposure to strong magnetic fields during or shortly after its creation. Wüncher's official biography omits any mention of acoustic research. In 1914, cartographers working for the Lisbon Observatory drafted a magnetic atlas of Europe, documenting variations in terrestrial magnetism across major cities. The chart showed subtle fluctuations, measured with precision instruments and verified through multiple readings. When overlaid with historical maps showing bell tower locations, the resonance lines converged at points corresponding to medieval pilgrimage routes. Paths walked by thousands over centuries, worn into the landscape itself. The official purpose of the atlas, studying earthquake frequencies and preparing for seismic monitoring networks. Yet annotations in the margins mentioned transmissions of unknown origin, detected at regular intervals during late evening hours. A note dated August 1914 added, "All data confiscated under wartime secrecy. Further study prohibited." That evening, fishermen on the Tagus River reported something unusual. The bells of San Vicente rang without apparent cause, their tone carrying across the water in waves. No one had entered the tower, the church was locked. Yet the sound persisted for nearly an hour, steady and rhythmic, before finally fading as fog rolled in from the Atlantic. The atlas itself vanished during the war. A single page survived, tucked inside an astronomy textbook sold at market. It showed Portugal's coastline marked with resonance measurements, each notation accompanied by a frequency value. At the bottom, someone had written, "Pattern repeats at 28-day intervals. Lunar correlation suspected but unconfirmed." Recovered diaries from Swiss engineer Hinrich Müller, donated to a Zurich archive in 1960, detail his work on resonant energy synchronization using bronze oscillators. The entries span 1890 to 1916, written in a methodical hand that grows increasingly erratic toward the final pages. In 1895, Müller travelled to Russia to assist in casting what he called harmonic bells. His technical descriptions match the St. Petersburg installations exactly: specific wall thicknesses, precise copper-to-tin ratios in the bronze, internal channels designed to amplify particular frequencies while dampening others. One entry reads, "They were not for worship, but for communication. The priests know this, we all know this." Yet the pretense continues. Later entries, dated 1916, show a different handwriting, shakier, less controlled. "I heard them once more across the mountains," he wrote. "The tone carried from Bavaria, clear as if the bell stood beside me. Impossible distance, impossible clarity. The old network still functions, though no one rings them anymore. The paper itself bears unusual marks, heat stains along the edges, scorching that suggests exposure to intense electromagnetic fields. Laboratory analysis revealed that the ink contained iron particles in concentrations high enough to respond to magnetic influence." Müller's official biography, published by the Swiss Engineering Society, makes no mention of bell work, acoustic research, or travel to Russia. He is remembered primarily for contributions to bridge construction. After the Great War, a directive issued from London ordered the recasting of church bells across Europe. For peace and remembrance, government memos cited metal shortages, the need to rebuild, the symbolic value of transforming instruments of war into instruments of faith. Yet inventory records show surplus reserves of bronze, far exceeding what churches required. Among the bells marked for recasting were those from the Kiev and St. Petersburg series, labelled in shipping manifests as obsolete resonance types. An inspector's report from 1920 warns of electrical interference patterns detected during testing, recommending immediate removal. The letter was filed, then pulled from records 2 years later. Only a catalogue reference remains. In modern spectral analysis, trace elements recovered from surviving fragments of these bells show unusual properties. Piezoelectric responses far stronger than standard bronze, crystalline structures suggesting precise temperature control during casting, and microscopic patterns indicating exposure to sustained electromagnetic fields. One bell from the Vienna Cathedral, overlooked during the general recasting, was finally removed in 1973. Workers reported tools behaving strangely near it, compass needles spinning, electrical equipment malfunctioning. The bell is now stored in a museum basement, wrapped in insulating material. Its tag reads simply, "Historical artifact, do not display." In 1932, a radio technician in Chicago noted interference every time nearby churches rang their bells. He charted the signal, repeating hum at 112 Hz. His logbook ends, "Pattern stable, not noise." That year, a museum quietly dismantled its industrial sound exhibit. The bells vanished. Chapter 12. 50 words. Across old cities today, Lisbon, St. Petersburg, Kiev, sensors record low-frequency vibrations matching 19th century patterns, aligned exactly with historical bell towers. When amplified, the tone resembles a deep harmonic pulse. Restoration experts claim it affects compass needles. The fragment from Pavilion 4 still hums under specific light, unexplained. Its frequency travels invisibly through glass, water, air, like memory refusing to fade.